Thanks very much, everyone, for staying with that. Up next, we're going to be talking about DevOps and practice maturity. So this is something I push on my teams a lot. So I'm super curious to hear from Satish. Satish is the director for DevOps and IT security. Whew, that is a big role at GainCredit. So Satish, welcome, and I look forward to your presentation. Please take it
Uh,
away.
Thanks, Akil. Yeah, I envy the unique combination DevOps and IT sec. It helps a lot. But yeah, here we're today here to talk about how to achieve a high DevOps maturity within your organization. We'll also be looking at where people are getting stuck at. So this whole session is going to be about how to jumpstart your existing practice, how to move forward to a high maturity. Now, Google has come up with a new layer beyond high elite maturity. When I'll stick to the puppet series of DevOps reports that's been published for the last 10 years in this particular conversation. So before we go in and talk about how to improve maturity of a DevOps practice within your organization, um, let's talk about what it is and why we do it. A very brief, so that uh, I mean people have the foundations. So starting off, what is DevOps? We've got a lot of definitions out there. We've got different organizations defining it in their own words. In essence, it just boils down to people, tools, and practices. But then, a different angle to look at what DevOps is what it means to a stakeholder. So different stakeholders will have different expectations out of your DevOps practice. For a CFO, it's more about, hey, how soon can I get return on my investments? Your chief marketing officer is like, hey, does, can it actually speed up my go to market cycle? Can I do A/B testing and figure out one particular feature is wanted by the customer, probably enhance it much faster, go to market much sooner with that? Your CISO is probably like, hey, how can I eliminate the human aspect from the whole equation? How can I have repeatable and reliable bots doing things so that it doesn't deviate from the prescribed boundaries for operations? For your general counsel, it's more like, hey, are we compliant to regulatory requirements? Are we compliant to all the contractual obligations? Is there a way we can actually enforce and ensure we are actually compliant every single second and minute of the day, and not a point in time check? So in a sense, it caters to different people in multiple different ways. So imagine DevOps as an object. What would be the properties of that object? Again, this is courtesy Gartner. um, uh, this mostly is about the team's focus on the business outcomes, especially related to the customer, not having an in a team specific KPI, and enhancing the team specific KPI doesn't help. It's about how the team actually contributes to the broader business KPI, especially around the customer outcomes. Our ability to move towards a moving target. I think in today's world, every organization, it's basically a competitive advantage. Your ability to move towards a moving target, be able to expand on your product, or even re-engineer your product on the fly as you test it out in the market. The third one, continuous principle process. Again, constant optimization, experimentation, extensive people collaboration. This is the cornerstone. Trust, people having people's back, being okay to actually fail. It's okay to fail 9 times as long as we learn out of it and create an awesome thing on the 10th attempt. Yeah. Removing constraints from the entire delivery process. This is out of the lean ways of working. So just anything that gets in the way, doesn't make sense, trying to get rid of it. And the final thing, automation is just one aspect of it, but it's a pretty important aspect of it. How do we get the human aspect out of the entire automation? Yeah. Now, imagine if we do, I mean, if we do DevOps practice, how do we quantify? What does it mean for organizations? How is it actually helping in terms of numbers? Again, this is a survey result, courtesy Gartner. Close to about 70-75% of the organization has said, hey, we've had faster cycle times once we've started practicing DevOps. Again, this depends on, we'll talk about the levels of maturity and how it helps the organization, but this is just to emphasize on the value by practicing such a DevOps practice. The security part, I'm pretty impressed with that. As a byproduct, your ability to manage your risks better, uh, that's a massive one. Even if it's a 21% increase, that's a massive number in terms of the security world. Now, the most understated and unspoken aspect, improved employee job satisfaction. I mean, it's always nice to have happy colleagues, right? So, over the years, we've heard the term DevOps for ages now. We're still talking about it. uh, so the one key thing here is, even though it's been around for a long time, organizations have adapted it. You've got people with organizations who are at the who are driving the direction of the DevOps space. Netflix, Google, Spotify, introducing new ways of working. And then you've got organizations trying to adapt practices and see how it helps their organization. So in a sense, we should look at what defines these stages, when we want to take a measuring scale and say, hey, I'm going to measure the maturity of my organization's DevOps practice, and how do I use the measuring scale. I mean, I would my conversation here, the talk here focuses on the state of DevOps report from Puppet, wherein the report considers deployment frequency, lead time for changes, MTTR, and change failure rate as the measuring scale to categorize between different levels of maturity: low maturity, mid maturity, and high maturity. As I mentioned earlier, Google's state of DevOps report has a fourth, which is basically an elite. But with state of DevOps, will stick with low, mid, and high. And when we look at where organizations today stand, this survey was done close to about with 2,600 participants by Puppet, and they've identified that a lot of organizations are stuck in the mid maturity. If you see that, the bright orange is your low maturity, which what low maturity means, the image on the left explains it. It's self-explanatory. And you've seen a gradual increase in the high maturity, organizations that claim to operate at a high maturity level. But then most of the organizations are in the mid maturity, and they've actually done an awesome work of segmenting that even further, the mid maturity, and deep diving into that to say how much of them are closer to high maturity, and how much of the mid maturity guys are closer to low maturity, and the true mid. And you can see a lot of them swaying towards the low maturity and trying to pull away into the high mid and the highs. Again, this talk is about how we can actually move away from the mid maturity into the high maturity spectrum. Before we go, I think I'll just walk through a scenario that I've come across way too often. It's not the case today, but then I've had such a scenario happen many times in the past. I'm pretty sure a lot of you guys could also relate to it. So you've had an awesome PO who's come up with an awesome idea. Hey, I'm going to just I've thought about this product. I think there's going to be a demand for this among our customer. I want to actually start doing A/B testing, or I want to get it online, and probably start doing some challenger champion testing to see how it fares in the market. It's an awesome idea. People like it. He spends a week to get consensus, probably gets all the approvals in place, and it's handed over to the most awesome dev team. These guys are rock star devs. They build up the entire service end to end within about 2 weeks. It works on local. Yeah. uh, and after 2 weeks, you've got a scenario where, hey, we build this. Now we've got to actually make this production ready. We've got to take it into a production environment. um, DevOps is like, hey, you need lower environments, you need higher environments. I need to create CI/CD pipelines for you. There's going to be a lot of other things that comes in. So it takes about another 2 weeks for DevOps to get all of these in place. And most of the time, I've seen that the same amount of time that's taken to actually create the uh, a product to work local. Uh, People spend the same amount of time getting it to work on a different land. So let's say they take about a couple of weeks. Extreme cases, yeah. And right after that, once you have the environment ready, and once you have the application, the service up and running, then comes your infosec guy saying, hey, you know what, I need to do some pen testing. I need to just test this from my end to see how it fares, a couple of days here and there, and they find some high, medium, lows, and it's all fixed, configurations all changed, and finally you're good. You spend some time there, and then right after that, it goes on to the operational compliance for sign off. I work in a very regulated environment, so it always needs an operational compliance team to review and sign off. And imagine, we identify I mean, some dependency that's used within the service that's basically not compliant. We shouldn't be using it, or it has, or let's just say this is a cloud service that's not PCI compliant. For the sake of this conversation, back to drawing board. We have to now rethink about the entire thing already. So, I mean, these sort of things happens when people start using the term DevOps pretty loosely. Mostly, this happens when an operational team is renamed into a DevOps team, rather than having DevOps as a practice, having a team that's called DevOps that's recently renamed from your production operations into DevOps. So people claim that they have DevOps practice, but without all the jazz around it. Now, how do we actually get out of this situation and move towards a higher DevOps maturity? Not just get stuck in the mid, even move beyond. A lot of people again are content moving away from the low spectrum into the mid spectrum, saying, hey, we've realized awesome outcomes because of this move. But then why stop at mid if you can actually move towards high? Um, I've, in my experience, seen that the team and the work structure really help driving the maturity of an organization. So uh, uh, this we started off with breaking the entire DevOps practice into very, very specific areas. I would say site reliability engineering. Starting off mostly focusing on post production reliability. Basically, they control the quality gates pre production, which enables a service to go through that. Only a successful service that ticks all the boxes for all these security gates is allowed to go into production, and ability to operate the service reliably on the production falls on the SRE land. SRE is the team that close the loop back into the dev team, into your value streams that actually develop your services. And this team is pretty vital to improve the maturity. And to start off with, when you initially form a site reliability engineering group, their primary focus will be reliability of the application post production, and ensuring the feedback from there is fed as quality gates for any service to go through the lower environments and towards the upper environment. Right after that, you've got platform engineering. Now, many people call this with different names. Some organizations call this as developer experience. This platform engineering team is the key here to move beyond mid maturity into the high maturity. So this group actually focuses on enabling self-service for developers and getting it out of the way, and ensuring that they get uh, the feedback for all their commits well ahead in time, and not at a very later stage. It's almost real time. So these are the folks who build frameworks, mostly through APIs or self-service UIs, that's used by the value streams. Again, sprint teams, your sprint teams, a cross-functional sprint team here, that I refer to as a value stream pod. Now, platform engineering creates these self-service UIs, APIs that's used by the broader software development organization, so that they're able to move faster. So we give them the boundary within which they're able to operate freely without waiting on DevOps, without waiting on infosec, without waiting on operational compliance. And this basically allows them to also fail fast, and then use that feedback to succeed quickly. Value stream pods are a very cross-functional team, people who've got software development experiences, plus a strong cloud knowledge, people who've been very familiar with the DevOps practice. Now, this particular team is able to solve challenges by themselves. We are also enabling them to make the right decision upfront. So what you have to maintain, what you have to build on top of in your later year, depends on what you're actually designing today. Do you want to actually run your own MySQL server that scales up to like 30 TB, 40 TB in about 4 years, 5 years, and then you think about migrating it to a cloud native service? Or do you want to make that right decision on day one? This cross-functional team, the value stream pod, along with your architecture group, is going to be making the most difference in selecting the right tools and technologies that doesn't accumulate tech debt, that allows you to build on top of it and be competitive in the future. So coming back to platform engineering, I'll be focusing on platform engineering because that's based on the state of DevOps report, and my experience has demonstrated enough evidence in pushing the practice maturity from low to mid, and even from mid to high. And let's talk about an example of platform engineering, delivery, something that they've created. How does it look? It's easy to basically say a self-service UI or an API. A particular example here is, imagine you're an organization that's got, you're going through an API transformation initiative. You have a monolith, you want to break it down to microservices. You want to ensure all of these are exposing APIs with certain guidelines, and you want to support this to happen seamlessly. A lot of times you've got like about 5 or 6 value streams, taking a monolith, breaking it among themselves. They say, hey, let's just break it into 5 services. You've got 5 teams working on the 5 services, but then the dependency for you is, you might have a single group that's catering on the a CI/CD, and on the infrastructure, and on also feedback on the architecture for the service. And that's the bottleneck. Now, instead of having a single group work on requirements for sprint teams, it's easier for that single team to actually create um, a platform which helps the sprint teams solve their problems by themselves. So they want to create so service A wants to use Node.js as their language. They want to create a CI/CD pipeline, and they want to define the number of stages, number of tests, and number of environments within their pipeline. All they need to do is create their repo, introduce a config file inside the repo that tells what are the lower environments that they need, what are the tests that they would want to run in the lower environments. And you've got a central framework that's built by the platform engineering team that scans the repo, automatically creates your CI and CD pipeline and the necessary infrastructure, and then starts deploying against it. Of course, it sounds oversimplified. It depends on standardization of your deployment architecture. So again, if you're breaking a monolith into microservices, you should first agree on what's your where are you going to run this against. You don't want one service to be on the Kubernetes LAN and the other service to be on a ECS Fargate, and then trying to talk with each other. Assuming all of those are completely standardized and you've made some really sane decisions around that, having a team focus on creating these pipelines automatically based on config allows you to scale from 5 sprint teams to even 100 sprint teams without having a dependency on a different group. And platform engineering is the group that basically helps achieve that. you can also equate it to a developer experience, because the objective for this particular team is to ensure the dev is able to take the code from its local environment onto production all by themselves within the group, as opposed to having a reliance on a different team. One of the byproduct of a platform engineering practices that you also have service ownership. Imagine you have a completely different team operating your service in production and responding to on calls for any reliability issue. The kind of ownership within your team will be pretty low for such a setup. But imagine if you are able to define the environments, the lower environments through which your services pass through the quality gates. There will of course be some mandatory quality gates, injected by your QA group and your infosec group and your compliance group, to ensure certain levels of standards are met. But then beyond those mandatory quality gates, you can and you are at liberty to configure your own quality gates to ensure the service is absolutely reliable on post production. So that's a very simple example. Normally, right after the slide, I used to do a small demo of the actual CI/CD framework, how it can scale from 5 repo to 100 repo. And given this is only for like 20-25 minutes, I'm skipping that. But having imagine this platform engineering group delivers a lot of self-service and APIs for devs to reuse. Uh, what would be the same scenario that we've actually gone through earlier? You've got a PO who has an awesome product, is got his team to start working on it. On day one, they basically, instead of talking to a DevOps team, on day one they would just start using the self-service platform. Now they also this particular dev team is not just a core dev team. Now it's also a value stream. You've got cross-functional folks on it, so they make really wise design decisions to ensure we are picking the right tool without accumulating any tech debt. And moving on, security and compliance are baked into the pipeline. You get immediate feedback on day one saying, hey, one of the dependencies that you use or the service that you've picked to be part of your the cloud native service that you picked for your service to run is actually not PCI compliant or HIPAA compliant or whatever you are interested about. So platform engineering actually helps a lot. Okay, so this I've spoken about my experiences, but then let's briefly also look at what the state of DevOps report 2021 also had to say about it. Um, yeah. So here you on the left you basically see the kind of practices that's followed in the organization, and on the right, against low, medium, high, the columns, the numbers that you actually see are the percentage of population that are actually following the practice. So let's look at a couple of practices that's done in the high maturity by the high maturity folks. The first two, a cross-functional team that builds features and independently ships them and runs them for the customer. Basically ownership of the service end to end, from your local to your production within a particular value stream themselves. This particular behavior is seen predominantly in a lot of in 26% of the high maturity folks. A team that provides software delivery solutions for other teams to consume, mostly through APIs and of course self-service UIs. Again, this is the platform engineering concept where that adds a lot of difference in the way your organization evolves in the DevOps journey. A couple of things that's actually done less by the high maturity team. They only 5% of the high maturity folks actually have a team that's responsible for responding to tickets related to infrastructure issues. I mean, today it might even be much smaller, because infrastructure, as you know, is kind of abstracted away completely, depending on the kind of solutions that you select and use. Kubernetes, for example, for many scenarios in the past that we've had to plan for infrastructure issues, Kubernetes actually helps abstract it away with a lot of batteries included. Now that's a lot of data, and which indicates, platform engineering, value streams, SRE, a combined practice, and how you structure your work instead of having them as a single group and then trying to grow through the journey, having them focused on specific areas and then evolve in the journey. This is not the end state, though. You can, you should actually model this to what works for your organization. The boundary between SRE, platform engineering, and your value stream, again, is something that you have to, you're at liberty to carve based on your organization needs. So how do we measure this? If we start, practicing this in our organization, how do we measure this in within our organization? Few things that I've been able to see in my past experience is the time to market, how we've been able to respond to requirements and take it fast to the market. The actual cycle time, the wait time between teams has uh, for most of the known scenarios, it's almost eliminated. For some scenarios where it's a completely new requirement, there is still some lead time, but then having an optimization at that area. The innovation markers, this is the time to fail, the time that you take to fail, and how comfortable you are with failure. Imagine you've got ways in which sprint teams can try doing something, using an outcome from platform engineering. You've got a platform that allows you to leverage certain services and try something out. You fail fast, you get the feedback, and that feedback is available for everybody else to actually consume, and you learn from that and you build a new version of it in a better way. It drives that comfort with failure actually drives a lot of innovation. And one really valued outcome, cross skill team, having that value stream. I've had some full stack devs not having much knowledge on the cloud. Not that, I mean, we're not expecting somebody to be a ninja and know everything. That's impossible. But then just improving the cloud IQ of folks to a reasonable amount, so that they're able to see why we pick and choose certain services for certain scenarios. And the value drivers slide, we've seen some quantifiable scenario, but I felt a lot of qualitative impact as well. The entire quality and the confidence level of the team delivering a solution is much better with this focused, narrow approach. And I think yeah, we're at the tail end. This is my last slide. What's the takeaway from this particular talk? The previous slide, I would have shown that 78% of the organizations are stuck at mid maturity. This is as per the Puppet report. The Google's State of DevOps 2021 report says close to about 68% is stuck at mid plus high. How do we push organizations from this zone to the next zone? My experience says platform engineering is the key. You People call it developer experience based platform, baseline team, whatever. But this function, uh, this group of people who are focused on making developers' lives easier, that's going to make a considerable difference. Work structure, how we organize work, absolutely matters. And scalability and modularity of everything. APIs, configurable, reusable. That's in your solution. That's the core aspect. I think that's it from my end. I'm not sure if I've just rushed this through and
You have, but that's okay. It's a very big topic, and here's a quick thing for the audience. I just want to apologize. We are a little bit over time, but Avik Das, who is going to join us, unfortunately, is having some internet issues and therefore is not able to join us. So if anyone is waiting for his talk, I'm really sorry, but we will not be having a data scientist join us. So, in his absence, Satish, maybe I can come back to you. You had mentioned that you usually run a demo of your CI/CD and build pipeline.
Mhm.
Is that a demo you have teed up, and is that something you can take us through since we have a bit of extra time?
Yeah,
Um,
Unfortunately, I don't think I've prepped that on my lap, and I think getting that on spinning up the servers
Not a
would take,
problem.
yeah. Uh,
Yeah,
yeah,
yeah.
but yeah,
Well,
I
plus we have
regret
to.
that. I regret that because this is a great opportunity to have additional time. But then I actually wanted. I mean, the initial 25 minutes was too small, which is why I had to rush this through.
Look, not an issue at all. This is a demo is an insane ask at the last minute,
Yeah.
and even a prepared demo is, you're chancing the demo gods, right? So
Yeah.
look, why don't we just do some Q&A, and
Yeah.
then we can wrap up after that. Is that okay?
Yeah.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
fabulous. So look, so my role, other than being here at API Days, is basically I lead up an architecture and engineering
Mm,
practice for a digital team. So I'm
mm,
super curious. A lot of the things you talked about kind of resonated with me as well.
mm,
I loved your idea of how you measure things, because
mm,
measurement is usually what you measure is something
mm,
you can of course come back to and optimize and change and coach people around, which is
mm,
always good. um, I'd love to know how you, coming back to that standards, right? And you talked about your platform engineering team kind of working through and applying some standards. I think specifically the example you used was, if one team is doing something with the containers and the other team is doing, or I think EKS, and the other team is using ECS. Um, how do you manage I guess sprawl of ideas, because
mm,
in some situations they do tend to lean themselves and lend themselves into things like Lambda or Fargate or whatever the case might be. In other situations it's more of a kube oriented situation. So how do you either coach the teams, or do you have multiple templates? Like how do you deal with that?
Yeah, I mean, focusing on why as opposed to why not is the trick here, because a lot of these, I mean, we've got a ton of cool technologies, platforms, container engines out there. People, it's obvious. Some new developer who's coming in from a different organization has seen an awesome implementation using EKS, and we are on ECS, and there's definitely a discussion about why not EKS. Focusing that conversation towards why, and also looking at what's the value of the additional benefits that we're getting. All batteries included is great, but do you actually need it for your business? How much of that are you going to leverage, and how is it going to reflect in terms of powering the business, having the business outcome? Now this is where I also called out team specific KPIs versus business specific
Mm.
KPIs. Every selection. So one of the debate that we had earlier was what's the technology or tool that you want to select for infrastructure as a code. People like Terraform, people like Pulumi, people like a lot of other things. Some guy wanted to try a lot of things using Ansible, but then the only thing that we were focusing on, which tool is going to help us
Mm.
build infrastructure reliably, repeatably in the shortest span of time. Had I come across a tool that allows me to create a architecture diagram, and then with a single click also get the pricing of the architecture, and again a single click create the infrastructure on the cloud, that's the most ideal solution. To a certain extent, depending on the kind of architecture you have, cloud formation would be able to do two out of the three. I'm not sure if it can actually get the pricing though. I mean, AWS should be able to fix it. They deliberately may not, but yeah, having such a tool is more
Mm.
important than focusing on, hey, we can actually use multi-cloud if we use Terraform. Not really. In reality, using
Mm.
Terraform, a lot of that is, you even specify the instance types, etc. In that. So it's going to be a lot of rework. Having a very objective conversation, moving it away from the being subjective and towards objective. It honestly depends on the maturity of the person at the other hand,
Mm. Sure.
Akhil. And yeah.
And it sounds almost like you're uh, like in my younger days, because I used to be a developer, right? And obviously, have come through the ranks. when I was a developer, and I suspect a lot of the audience would be in that same boat, developers want freedom, right? Freedom to pick the latest and greatest. Like I just found this thing. It showed up last night in a public GitHub repo. I'm going to use it and so forth. Uh, but it almost sounds like you're
Yeah,
saying, look, trend towards. Um, and I'm going to put some words in your mouth, so please tell me if I didn't
yeah.
quite get it right. But trend towards more opinionated approach to doing things, which basically gives you one path. It's almost like a golden path, if you will, right? As you showed uh, in your kind of almost like their DevOps flow, if you will, right? The idea from devs to platform to security and all those things. Like if you basically give them a path that says, if you follow these patterns, everyone's already looked at it and everyone's blessed these patterns. Therefore, you don't have to worry about talking to security. You don't have to talk about
Mm,
dealing with a lot of the testing and so
mm.
forth. Is that kind of where you're going with that approach, or am
Yeah,
I did I not quite get that?
you're
Yeah.
spot on. I would just like
Mm,
to add one more thing. So it's not going to be just tools or services prescribed by infosec compliance. That there's going to be some feedback from the devs. They know what's the best tool for the
sure.
product service. Having that loop. So you've got your lower environments, sandboxes, where devs have pretty much free hand in doing whatever, leveraging whatever service that they want to leverage within that environment. It's completely sandbox and not on public
Mm,
internet. And you're able to push the output of that through your pipelines, which basically tells you what's the score. You use a new service, you just have the ability to get some scores. One of them says, hey, everything is fantastic, but
yeah.
this service is just not signed off by infosec. Just have a conversation with them so that it triggers a review of that and addition. The end status, I mean, the ideal status to get out of the way and let people do whatever they want within, but then I'm still stuck at within a prescribed boundary that allows me to sleep well at night. And I've not solved that problem
That
yet.
that means your devs are not doing well enough. If they're letting you sleep at night, they're not causing enough problems yet.
Yeah,
I'm just joking, of
yeah.
course. Yeah. Okay. And out of curiosity, and hopefully this will be useful for the audience as well. Can you just talk a bit about, without necessarily giving anything away, just what are the tools of choice for you? As you talked about Terraform versus cloud formations, um, can if you um, were to advise someone in the audience who's going into a role like yours, and
Mhm.
they're just kind of going in and saying, gosh, I've used a whole bunch of things, but what is your recommendation, knowing that of course every situation is different, but like what's your baseline set of tools that you go in with?
Yeah, I would put a very big personally tag here. Personally, I would say, something that helps me um, um, move. Yeah, cloud native is my preference, of course, but at the same time, having that leverage to come out of the cloud should I know Google recently increased their prices. You don't want to be stuck with
Yes.
providers forever, and having that kind of ability to move away. I feel Kubernetes has done a really good job.
Mm,
But then,
mm.
my chief architect basically tells at every single opportunity that he hears Kubernetes, I don't let friends run Kubernetes by themselves. Don't run it by yourself. Use a cloud service provider and secure it for sure.
Mm,
Give you all the batteries. Yes, you need to have the right people. It depends on the kind of workforce that you've got. If they're skilled enough, they would be able to ramp
mm.
more on knowledge on that front. Um,
Sure.
yeah, just sticking with cloud native service using their again, I'm stealing his lines, using their engineers or product, by
Yeah.
just cloud native services instead of having your own engineers. That's the trick for me.
Yeah. So it sounds like Kubernetes you see as almost a standard, and then you're
Mm.
saying go with an EKS or AKS or GKE, or if you need to be hybrid cloud or multi-cloud, perhaps an
Yeah.
OpenShift or Tanzu or something, but you don't run it yourself. Is what I'm hearing. Is that right?
Yes, and I've got a again, I've got a strong opinion on multi-cloud and even multi-region. Which, yeah, AWS, for example, because I very much use AWS, and I've seen this hit me multiple times. No two regions are exactly
Mm,
operating the same way. There are feature differences. Literally, if you try to go multi-region, it's almost like a multi-cloud, and you want to go multi-cloud. Uh, you pretty sure better have the why instead of the why not.
mm,
It has to be of a substantial value, and many times I would bet that uh, the uh, the ability of a cloud service provider to recover than
mm.
for us to actually cut over to a different. If you're if unless you're
Yeah.
like active is a different things. You're throwing money at the problem. It's a very, it should be a
Mm,
mission critical application to be active.
yeah.
But if it's not a mission critical thing, nobody's going to suffer because of it. Not massively, it's just an inconvenience. Then I would still say stick to single region, stick to leverage the azs as much as possible, have
Mm,
self healing, and have confidence in the cloud providers, because if they screw it up, they will go out of business, they will lose customers. And
yeah.
in my experience, again, I've seen my engineers taking a lot more time to switch over to a different cloud than
Mm.
AWS actually fixing the problem. They fix it within at most like what, a day.
Yeah, I see it more being a regulatory requirement, right? So BCP or I think you're in a financial sector. So the, in Australia, for example, there's a law that came in, I think last year or the year before, that says you cannot just be on one public cloud. So you can be on public cloud and data center or different public clouds and so forth. But um, in those situations where it's like, well, okay, we just have to do it. That does introduce
I,
some
I
fun little wrinkles.
I think, yeah, I've been
Yeah.
in these conversations where multi AZ. I think a little bit of how to put this, a little bit of going into what multi AZ is, and the probability of a region to fail, and displaying that you've done enough efforts to stay alive, and maintain that mission critical application. That if you're able to demonstrate that with the regulators, they should be absolutely fine. I've not seen any regulator basically on paper say, I want multi-region, full stop.
Yeah.
Basically, there's a requirement behind it, and if you're able to fulfill that requirement. So if we have the ability for, say for example, if we have the ability for people to make if you're running a credit card business, right? I mean, one of the important thing that you want to do is ensure people have the ability to pay money back to you, and you don't want
Mm.
the that service to be down, especially not on the due date, because you're going to charge them interest. How do you handle these? If you're able to demonstrate that you've got a high availability for this, and then the probable downtime for this in a worst case scenario would be just limited to few minutes rather than a lot of hours, and you demonstrate ability to communicate with the customer effectively. That should be a reasonable good thing. It's always easy to go 99.7% of the way. The remaining 0.3 is going to be super difficult. Whether you want to do it or not is driven by
Mm.
business.
Yeah. And yeah, I mean, ultimately, right, all the things that we do, as much as we love to geek out over, fun little engineering problems,
Yeah.
if it doesn't serve a business purpose, it is ultimately not of much use, right?
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, amazing. Can I come back to that tools question? So I'm super curious for your CI/CD preference, if you're willing to share, of course.
Yeah. Okay. So, 5 years ago, the way I looked at CI/CD, it's a bit different from how I look at it today. 5 years ago, I've just seen the tool as a scheduler. Basically, it's just something that I I put my
Mm.
jobs in there, and it executes the job. I've been like super into creating handle scripts. That's spend a lot of time on making it
Mm.
reliable, and stuff. But 5 years down the line, I've learned my lesson. It's pretty expensive to maintain it and enhance it.
Yeah.
And My preference right now is to just, again, just like cloud native on the AWS side, if you use a cloud Git, GitLab, Bitbucket, or whatever,
Mm.
go with the attached pipelines. And if you're
Yeah.
not able to do something through those pipelines, you're pretty much, I would say you might want to look at your process. It's not like you're doing something wrong, but you may have an opportunity to improve your process. One of the
Yeah.
thing that I would recommend, say an easy example: you are on EKS, you want to deploy onto EKS. Do you want to build your own CI/CD and then create the deployment logic on your CI/CD tool, and also create the rollback logic onto your CI/CD tool? Or you would want to use a pipeline
Some
that
sort of
comes along
GitOps
with the,
thing.
yeah, yeah,
Yeah. Yeah.
use GitOps. And if these guys, I think they already do, I'm not sure, but if they're able to integrate with your New Relics or App Dynamics, and if they're able to even
Mm.
measure the performance of the new service for the next 30 minutes and give you a feedback on a rollback decision, those are
Yeah.
awesome things. People talk about AI ops. I would say it's got a lot of use cases in monitoring our production
Mm.
systems, and then making these decisions that a human cannot look at all those lines of logs.
Yeah. No, absolutely. Well, look, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you, Satish. Thank you also for just allowing us to continue monopolizing your time, and especially to answer some of my questions, which are
Sure.
hopefully interesting for you and for the audience.
Yeah,
Yeah.
one parting word before I leave, Akhil.
Okay.
I've just looked at a comment, Hasham Kwazi. It said,
Oh, great. That's good
yeah,
to hear.
he doesn't agree with DevOps making people's lives easier. Again, most of the times it doesn't make the DevOps engineers' lives easier, for sure. Well then, yeah, at least when we focus on a particular problem statement and solve that problem statement, surely
Mm.
the next time around when people hit the same scenario, it's going to make people's life a little bit easier. It's just one step at a time, and focusing on very, very specific developer experience scenarios, and ensuring you're solving it permanently. My super boss says, first time right. The very first time you do something, do it right. If
Yeah.
you take that approach, I'm pretty sure you'll be able to make a lot of difference even in your employee's life.
I love it. I love the super boss comment as well. So Desh, if I can ask for one last thing, which is if you're willing to be contacted and such, if you can maybe pop your contact details into that public chat, that would be amazing. Otherwise, thank you so very much for your time and for your lovely presentation. And I'm sure I'll follow you on LinkedIn, and I'm sure it'll be very interesting as we go along. Thank you very much.
All right, thanks a lot, guys.
All right.